Connecting Decimals and Fractions, Part 2. In this video, we're going to convert fractions to decimals. Now, the way we do this depends on whether or not our denominator is a factor of 10 or 100. If it is, then we can write an equivalent fraction using a denominator of 10 or 100. The denominator will tell you the place value to use for the decimal. Then the numerator from the equivalent fraction will be the digits used in the decimal. So let's try this out. Here I have 3/5. Well, I need to write an equivalent fraction using a denominator of 10 or 100. Well, I know that if I multiply 5 by 2, I get 10. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So I multiply the 3 by 2, and I get 6. So an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10 is 6/10. And I can write that as a decimal by putting the 6 in the tenths place. Let's look at a mixed number, 4 and 12/25. Well, automatically I know that the 4 is my whole. It's a whole number. It's not the part of the whole, so it goes before the decimal. I don't have to worry about it, but I do have to worry about the 12/25 and how I'm going to represent that after the decimal. Well, I can write an equivalent fraction using a denominator of 100 here, because 25 times 4 equals 100. And remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So I need to multiply 12 by 4. That gives me 48. So an equivalent fraction to 12/25 is 48/100, and that's easy to write as a decimal. So I went ahead and put that 4 in front of the decimal because it was a whole number. And then my part of the whole is the 48/100, and I can write it like that. All right. Now let's try 17/10. This is an improper fraction, which means that our numerator is larger than the denominator. What I can do here is I can divide to make a mixed number. So if I divided 17 divided by 10, I know that 10 goes into 17 one whole time and gives me a remainder of 7. So a new fraction is 1 and 7. Ooh, that's ugly. Let's try it somewhere else. 1 and 7/10. There we go. That looks better. So 1 and 7/10. Well, like I said in our last problem with a mixed number, this 1 is a whole number, so it's going to go before the decimal. I can go ahead and put it in that blank. What I want to focus on now is the 7/10. Now, it says to write an equivalent fraction using a denominator of 10 or 100, but this already has a denominator of 10. So I know that 7/10 can be written with the 7 in the tenths place like that. So 1 and 7/10 as a fraction looks like this as a decimal. And then let's try one final one, 42/7. Now this one is kind of tricky because it doesn't have an equivalent fraction with a denominator that is a factor of 10 or 100. So what I need to do is I'm just going to divide and see what that gives me. 42 divided by 7. Well, 7 times 6 is 42, and I have no remainder. So my decimal here is actually just going to be a 6.0. So 6 and nothing behind the decimal. So on that note, let's try a few more where the denominator is not a factor of 10 or 100. What we have to do is we have to divide the numerator by the denominator. The numerator becomes the dividend and the denominator becomes the divisor. So let's try this with 1/8. What I would do is I would divide 1 divided by 8. Well, 8 doesn't go into 1, so I will go ahead and I put a decimal after the 1, to the right of the 1, to the right of the dividend, and then a 0 after that decimal. And then I'm going to want to go ahead and put a decimal up above into my answer space so my digits stay lined up by place value. Now I'm going to divide as usual, as if the decimals are not even there. So let's try 8 into 10. Well, 8 goes into 10 one time and leaves 2. Now, there's a leftover, so I go ahead and add another 0 and then bring that down. 8 goes into 20 two times, and there's still a leftover, so I need to add another 0 and bring it down. And 8 goes into 40 5 times, and now I don't have any leftovers. So 1/8 can be written as 125 thousandths. So we have to divide. That's what we're doing, is we're dividing. Let's try it again with our mixed number here, 2 and 15/40. Now, because I see this 2 in front, that represents a whole number. That's going to go in front of my decimal, and so I don't even have to worry about dividing with that number. I can just write it in my answer blank. What I do want to do is divide 15 by 40. But personally for me, I think if I can make my number smaller, that's going to help me out. I notice that 15 and 40 can both be divided by 5, which means the fraction I'm really dealing with here is 3/8. So this is really 2 and 3/8. And let's see what happens when I divide 3 by 8. Now remember, 8 doesn't go into 3, so I'm going to go ahead and put the decimal after the 3 and also bring it up. And then I need to put a 0 after the 3, after the decimal. 8 goes into 30 3 times. 8 times 3 is 24. So I subtract, I get a leftover. So I bring another 0 in. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. And I just keep bringing in zeros until I have no leftovers. Now, does 8 go into 40 evenly? Yes, it goes in 5 times. And now I have no leftovers. So I've already written the 2 in my answer blank over here to represent the whole. And now after the decimal, I need to write what I got from my division problem. So 2.375, or 2 and 375 thousandths, is the decimal equivalent to 2 and 15/40, or 2 and 3/8. Let's try this again with 1/3. Now 1/3 is already simplified, so it's going to be pretty easy for me to divide. I want to know how many times 3 can go into 1. Well, 3 doesn't go into 1, so that's why we add that decimal there, bring it up, and then we put the 0 behind the dividend, behind the decimal. And I'm going to see how many times 3 goes into 10. 3 goes into 10 3 whole times. 10 minus 9 is 1. And then because I have a leftover, I'm going to add a 0, bring it down, and I get 10 again. So 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. And so 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring another 0 down, and I get 10 again. So I'm starting to notice a pattern here. This is going to keep happening over and over and over again. When this happens, we call it a repeating decimal. It continues to have the same remainder over and over and over again. So what I do is I'm going to place a bar over the numbers that are repeating in the decimal for my answer. Well, the number that's repeating here is 3. So my answer is simply going to be 3/10, but it's a repeating decimal, so I have that pretty little bar above the 3. Let's try one more. 2/3. Again, I'm going to divide. How many times does 2 go into 3? Nope, did it backwards. How many times does 3 go into 2? That makes more sense now. Okay, so it doesn't go into 2. I have to put that decimal and add my 0. And now I can see how many times 3 goes into 20. Well, 3 times 6 is 18, so I'm going to subtract and I get a 2. I'm going to add the 0, bring it down, and I got 20 again. So I'm starting to notice something similar happening with this one that happened on the last one. 3 goes into 20 6 times. I get 18, and I get a remainder of 2, and if I bring a 0 down again, I'm going to get 20 again. So I know I'm going to have a repeating decimal for my answer, which means I'm just going to put 6/10 with a bar over the 6 because it is a repeating decimal. And that's how you convert fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions.